Chapter 17. Senior Disciple Li 1. Their weapons could only be seen as flashing blurs as the saber and the sword clashed with no clear victor. Han Li wasn't able to keep up with the fight at all, only understanding that the fight was very intense. The difficulty or effectiveness of their movements, and which person had the advantage, were far beyond his scope of knowledge. Junior Disciple Han, I don't know which master you've trained under, but I'm sure your martial arts has made massive improvements after training in isolation, right? Little Abacus curiously asked. Every inner disciple of the Seven Mysteries sect, after 2 years of practicing their fundamentals in the 100 Disciples Hall, would be separated and be apprenticed to a master to learn more profound martial arts. Only after they finished their apprenticeship would they be able to hold a permanent position within the sect. In the case that a disciple displayed remarkable strength in the disciple examination, they wouldn't even need to practice fundamentals for 2 years. Instead, they would directly enter the 7 Supreme Division, where the sect leader or vice-sect leaders would personally impart some knowledge onto them, giving them a formidable advantage akin to a carp leaping over a dragon gate. 1. Within those 2 years of practicing one's fundamentals, those with outstanding potential would also be noticed by some elders and accepted as their personal disciple. Backed and taught by such a powerful figure, these disciples' prospects couldn't even be compared to those of other disciples. After hearing that Han Li had only just come out of seclusion, little Abacus was even more sure that he hadn't heard of this person before. He naturally assumed that Han Li was a prestigious inner disciple, so he had been very respectful to him in hopes of gaining favor. A few years ago, an honored elder took me in as his disciple, but please understand, I cannot disclose just who this elder is. Han Li knew what the other disciple was trying to do, so he had to maintain a matter-of-fact expression while also pretending to carry around an air of arrogance. Is that right? Senior Disciple Han is quite lucky then. Your position within the inner sect must be high, and your potential unlimited. This junior disciple hopes that, in the future, Senior Disciple will lend a hand towards his juniors. Little Abacus didn't particularly care about why Han Li concealed the name of his master. Whichever honored elder he was surely stronger than his own master. So little Abacus's tone had immediately changed. Senior Disciple Han, just one look at you and I know that you are definitely not someone ordinary and that you will be successful without any difficulties. He continued to flatter Han Li. This person's skin is so dark, and his face looks rather stupid as well. How could he be the disciple to an honored elder while I am so clever, but haven't been noticed by any elders yet? Little Abacus secretly muttered to himself while maintaining a respectful expression. Han Li had recognized the change in his speech as well. 1 second he was Junior Disciple Han, and the next he was Senior Disciple Han. This was far too funny for Han Li to bear. However, Han Li didn't look down on little Abacus for that. Trying to gain favor with those higher than oneself was one's natural instinct. Someone who wanted a better life first needed to know his or her place. The people who understood this were ones who were successful in life. But what was most disappointing was that the words Han Li had just said were primarily true. Han Li could only be considered nothing more than smuggled goods when compared to those true personal disciples of honored elders. Any other disciple of the Seven Mysteries sect could easily beat him. If he were to try to flaunt his status and be arrogant, the truth would be quickly revealed. Han Li forced out a smile as he calmly listened to little Abacus's flattery. It was almost as if he were at a dinner party. Senior Disciple Han must be strong in martial arts. If he were to enter the ring, he would definitely beat these fighters into sorry states. Definitely. Little Abacus continuously flattered Han Li while also watching the match. Aye, how strange. Such a prestigious disciple should have formidable internal strength, but why does he look utterly unimpressive? He looks scrawny and weak, and his eyes don't have the shine of those who had broken through their acupoints. No matter how closely I look, he is nothing but a normal kid that doesn't know any martial arts. Little Abacus became more and more bewildered. The outcome has been decided. Han Li's light voice had immediately broke little Abacus from his pondering. Surprised, little Abacus swiftly looked back at the ring. As it turns out, the saber wielder had his weapon knocked to the side. One arm was limp, while the other clutched at a wound. His face was ashen, but he did not declare his surrender. This wasn't surprising since the strength between the two disciples wasn't all that much different. If he hadn't slipped up just then, they would have been evenly matched. When little Abacus saw this, there was a look of disappointment on his face, and he said softly, "What a shame. What's wrong? What do you mean by shame?" Hanley didn't see anything noteworthy, but it seemed that this was not the case for the youth next to him. If Fatty Wong's team had won this fight, then this would have been their third victory, and their best 3 out of 5 contest would have ended. It's a shame that he couldn't end it here. Oh, but that doesn't matter. Right now, the remaining person on Wang Depang's side is our strongest disciple in martial arts. He uses the lightning-fast saber, which is incomparably fierce and able to smash through metal. Haha. To be able to witness senior disciple Li's strength firsthand, I didn't come here for nothing. No matter who appears on Zhang Chonggui's side, our victory is assured. Little Abacus, who was just depressed about their loss, quickly became excited once more as he began to talk about this senior disciple Li, too. So this will be the final match?
Anlieska.
He wondered who this senior disciple Li was. It seemed he really knew nothing about the major figures in the sect. At this moment, a grim figure came up to Fatty Wong's side. The youth was holding a long saber as he walked up to the middle of the ring. Without saying a single word, he closed his eyes. Senior disciple Li. Senior disciple Li. Senior disciple Li. Seeing this youth come up to the ring, everyone grew excited as they all began to call out his name. With each shout, they grew louder until they eventually began to shake the entire ring with the magnitude of their voices. At this moment, there wasn't a single person that was cheering for a specific side. There was only one unanimous cry for this youth. Chapter 18. Senior Disciple Li, 2. Is this senior disciple Li very famous? What's his background? Hanley was extremely surprised by this senior disciple Li's popularity. You don't even know who senior disciple Li is? Well, I was in seclusion for a few years. Oh yes, I had actually forgotten. Pardon my terrible memory. I just always thought that there were no disciples in the Seven Mysteries sect who didn't know about senior disciple Li. It was this preconception that caused me to accidentally forget about your seclusion. Little Abacus suddenly realized as he hurriedly apologized. Could you tell me more about this senior disciple Li? Senior disciple Han. Of course I can. Well, every junior disciple within the sect knows the story of senior disciple Li. Little Abacus, seeing senior disciple Li's opponent hesitating, took this opportunity to explain the legend of senior disciple Li to Hanley. Senior disciple Han. I don't like to boast, but the story of senior disciple Li is known to both the junior and senior disciples of the Seven Mysteries sect. After a short introduction, Little Abacus began to reveal the story of senior disciple Li, and the story was legendary indeed. This senior disciple Li entered the sect about 4 years ago, but was from a different batch than Hanley. He too failed the preliminary test and entered the sect as an unofficial disciple. But after half a year, not only did he achieve the best results out of all the unofficial disciples in his group, he also sparred with the other senior disciples. Defeating over 30 senior disciples single-handedly and breaking many records, senior disciple Li had gained a lot of attention from the higher-ups in the sect. After an intense inspection, everyone was shocked that the bones of senior disciple Li were extremely ordinary, and even his potential was determined to be limited. This made all the higher-ups disappointed, so none of the higher-ups accepted him as their personal disciple. After the 2 years of basic training, he was delegated as a disciple of a protector and only managed to learn the most basic of martial skills in the Seven Mysteries sect. The lightning-fast saber technique that he was proficient in was one of the most commonly taught martial skills in the Seven Mysteries sect. If that were the end of his story, senior disciple Li could not be considered legendary, but rather someone with a good beginning and a weak ending. But after a short while, relying solely on this seemingly common martial skill, the lightning-fast saber technique, he swept across all of the disciples in that year's annual competition. Using just a single technique and ranking 16th, he became the cream of the crop within his generation, which garnered the attention of the higher-ups once again. In the subsequent yearly competitions, senior disciple Li was incomparably bold and powerful, sweeping across all of the competitors like a sharp sword. He obtained an astonishingly high rank, gaining pride and face for all the new disciples. In last year's annual competition, he actually was ranked third. One must know that the disciples in the first two ranks had already been in the sect for over 10 years. These two disciples were members of an older generation, their age roughly 27 or 28, and they had a much greater internal strength compared to senior disciple Li. There were also many who believed that if senior disciple Li had the same level of internal strength as the two top-ranked disciples, senior disciple Li would undoubtedly be ranked first. Precisely because of this, senior disciple Li captured the attention of the higher-ups once again and was specially nominated to be sent outside of the sect to undergo training and help out with the 7 mystery sects' various external affairs. While disciples of the same generation were still undergoing training, senior disciple Li had long rendered meritorious service for the sake of the 7 mystery sect and had even been nicknamed Tiger Li in Jianghu. After which, he was allowed to enter the 7 Supreme Division and obtained the chance to practice higher-grade martial arts. Han Li could not help but feel moved. After he heard the story, if everything he heard was real, then senior disciple Li was indeed extraordinary. Senior disciple Li started as an unofficial disciple, and yet he could achieve the results he had today. How admirable indeed. On Zhang Changgui's side, they reluctantly sent someone out after a long period of discussion. The disciple they sent out looked to be relatively strong, unsheathing a gleaming sword with the thickness of a finger from the scabbard that hung around his waist. The disciple holding the sword was certainly not a person with an ordinary background. After senior disciple Li sensed that someone entered the ring, he slowly opened his eyes, which seemed to be filled with radiance. Suddenly, senior disciple Li loudly shouted. His sudden shout, akin to a thunderclap, reverberated throughout the entire region, causing buzzing sounds in everyone's ears. His opponent was likewise affected by the shout, and an expression of fear began to surface on his face. As he shouted, senior disciple Li had already drawn his saber. With a flash of movement, one deceptive action released over tens of blade shadows, trapping his opponent in an encirclement of numerous blades. However, senior disciple Li's opponent was quick-witted and vigilant. Although he had panicked slightly, the movement of his sword was insidious and crafty, and he managed to parry all of the blade's strikes with an impenetrable defense. Who is this person? Han Li could not help but ask. He is the son of the 5th elder, Zhao Ziling. The skill he executed, Willow Swordplay, is extremely tough to fight against. How good is he compared to senior disciple Li? Naturally, senior disciple Li is still stronger. Little Abacus said with pride glowing on his face. Why didn't Zhang Changgui send out a stronger expert instead? Zhao Ziling is already the strongest among them. Among us, the junior disciples, who would be able to defeat senior disciple Li? No matter who they send, it's useless. Little Abacus gloated with a hint of taking pleasure in their opponent's misfortune. Indeed, although Zhao Ziling's swordplay was not chaotic, he lacked any killing intent. He was pressured almost to the point of defeat by senior disciple Li, and those with more experience could tell with a single glance that Zhao's defeat was only a matter of time. Han Li watched for a moment before another suspicion rose in his heart. There is one thing I still find strange. Why are all the disciples here of the younger generation? What about all of our seniors? Even if the rules prohibit them from entering the fight, for the sake of excitement, there should still be 1 or 2 coming to spectate. However, there isn't even a single senior disciple. Why is that so? Han Li candidly voiced out the suspicion in his heart. Little Abacus, after hearing Han Li's question, had a total change in his expression and had a bizarre look on his face as he gazed at Han Li. This made Han Li feel extremely puzzled. Could it be that he had asked a question that was considered taboo in the sect? Chapter 19. Battle in Jianghu. Senior Disciple Han, you are really deaf to the outside world. This was such a massive event in the sect, and yet you didn't know about this? Even though you were in seclusion, your master should have spoken of it to you. Little Abacus's tone seemed to get more and more suspicious. After hearing the question, Han Li did not even bother to speak. Instead, he took out a medallion and passed it over for Little Abacus to inspect. Senior Disciple Han, what are you doing? When have I ever doubted you? How could I not believe you? The moment I saw you, I realized that you looked familiar. I must have met you a long time ago, Little Abacus quickly scanned the medallion, and upon finding out that Hanli was indeed the disciple of some elder, he frantically laughed to defuse the tension. Now, can you tell me? Hanli was still concerned about the question he asked earlier. Of course, there's no problem. Damn, this is terrible. I hope I didn't offend this guy. Little Abacus mumbled as his heart shuddered. Then he told the whole truth of the matter to Hanli. For the past few years, the Seven Mysteries sect and the Feral Wolf Gang had more and more clashes for the sake of control over the nearby wealthy towns. In total, the two major powers had over 10 clashes, and they both suffered plenty of casualties. Trained as mounted bandits, the members of the Feral Wolf Gang were extremely ferocious, as if they were unafraid of death, and they would go berserk at the sight of blood. The disciples of the Seven Mysteries sect, despite having superior martial arts, did not possess the right kind of killing intent that was necessary, and when fighting the Feral Wolf Gang, they would always avoid causing too much damage. Thus, in the end, the Seven Mysteries sect would inevitably suffer more casualties. After a few more clashes, the higher-ups of Seven Mysteries sect couldn't take this lying down, and thus, they had mobilized the majority of the disciples within their sect to smash the Feral Wolf Gang's members into smithereens. There were two reasons why the Seven Mysteries sect did so. First, the control of the towns within its territory was too valuable to be lost, and secondly, to have the disciples become used to bloodshed, allowing them to gain practical battle experience in Jianghu. Even so, despite the inner disciples of the Seven Mysteries sect holding the advantage during the last few battles, there had been too many casualties. Even some of the older seniors had failed to return to the sect alive. After Little Abacus said this, he could not help but sigh. After that, the sect leaders changed their strategy by letting the inner disciples take care of some minor missions and gain experience elsewhere in Jianghu. After they were more used to combat, they would come back and join in the fight against the Feral Wolf Gang. By doing so, the number of casualties was effectively minimized. Now, after each inner disciple had 2 years of training in the sect, they would be sent down the mountain to take charge of some minor missions to gain experiences before they were tasked to fight against the Feral Wolf Gang. 1. As such, the older senior disciples had already been sent out of the mountain, leaving only a few defenders and the junior disciples who had not yet completed their training. After listening, Hanli suddenly understood why there were differences on the mountain now compared to 4 years ago.
Yang.
A sound rang out as a sword flew into the sky. Zhao Ziling's left hand was pressing on a wound on his right hand, and as he retreated a few steps, his face turned pale while he breathed heavily. Under senior disciple Li's ferocious saber techniques, Zhao Ziling had no time to retreat, and thus, he had no choice but to use the sword in his hand to block the attack. Because his internal strength was insufficient, the weapon he held had been flung into the air because of the clash. Senior disciple Li, you are formidable indeed. This junior brother admits his defeat. Zhao Ziling forcefully smiled as he bowed slightly. Loud exclamations rang out among the spectators. Senior disciple Li, what a graceful martial skill.
Senyor disciple Li, excel·lent saber tècniques.
Senior disciple Li, please give me some guidance. Cries of admiration rang out for their idol, the sound reverberating through the entire region. Senior disciple Li kept the huge saber lifted in the air while his cheeks turned red. Initially, it seemed that he wanted to say something, but his expression suddenly changed as he furrowed his brows as if thinking of something. Senior disciple Li said coolly, I still have urgent things to do. Goodbye. Turning around, senior disciple Li relied on a movement technique to swiftly leave the area.
Sisse.
Not only is senior disciple Li proficient in the saber arts, his movement technique is superb as well.
Yes.
Indeed. Words of praise began to ring out. Hanli furrowed his brows. This senior disciple Li's martial arts were indeed not bad, but it appeared he liked to be in the limelight, just like a teenager. After he reflected, Hanli could not help but smile bitterly. He himself was not any older than senior disciple Li, and yet, his thinking was so overly matured, just like an old man's. It seems that after practicing the oracular chant, his mental state had matured at a faster rate when compared to his peers. Junior brother, up to now, I still haven't learned your true name. Hanli eyed Little Abacus nearby as he suddenly thought of the question. My name is Jin Dongbao. However, Senior Disciple Han can just refer to me as Little Abacus. Little Abacus was excited after Han Li asked for his name. He figured that he had gained the favor of Han Li and would be able to use him to back him in the future. Next time you are sick or injured, come look for me. I will treat you for free. Han Li patted his shoulders, turned his body, and walked back into the forest region. He left behind a dumbstruck Jin Dongbao, who was still pondering over what Han Li's words meant. Chapter 20. Essence Extraction Pill. After walking a long way from the mountain region, Han Li could still hear the voices discussing how to settle Fatty Wang and Zhang Changgui's dispute. However, Han Li decided not to concern himself about the matter anymore. Whenever he thought Little Abacus's dumbstruck expression, he could not help but laugh out loud. His small excursion outside the valley had indeed lifted his spirits, and he was no longer as depressed as before. He ventured out of the forest and walked straight ahead. A small creek appeared at the end of the path. Han Li inclined his head upwards and looked at the fiery hot sun before lowering his head to avoid the glare and to drink some water from the creek. He felt that taking a bath right now would not be a bad idea. As he bent downwards, with both of his hands entering the cool creek water, a voice filled with pain suddenly sounded out and reached his ears. Han Li was surprised to think that there would be people in such a remote region. Following the sound of the voice, Han Li wandered upstream and found a person wearing a disciple's robe lying on the ground, his body convulsing while his limbs flailed about. The moment Han Li saw the person, he knew that the disciple was suffering from an acute illness, and if he didn't help now, then the disciple's life would be at risk. Han Li rushed over and took out a wooden box from his robes. From the wooden box, he drew out silver needles that seemed to reflect light as he pierced them into the acupoints on the disciple's back. After he was done with the acupoints on the disciple's back, he turned the body of the disciple around and began to work with the acupoints located on his chest. When he turned the disciple's body over, however, Han Li sucked in a deep breath. He was shocked beyond measure. This person, who was flailing about just now, was none other than the senior disciple that participated in the battle earlier. Stunned, Han Li could only gaze at the facial features of senior disciple. The current senior disciple did not have the air of a peerless expert at all. There was no heroic demeanor to be seen anywhere, only a cold face full of pain and suffering as his features contorted together and white foam leaked from his mouth. It was obvious that senior disciple was suffering from too much pain to bear, and he was almost to the point of being unconscious. Han Li regained his calm as he muttered to himself. Akin to flowing water, Han Li's hands began to prick the acupoints on senior disciple Li's body continuously with over a dozen needles. When he finished piercing the final needle, Han Li wiped the beads of sweat that had formed on his forehead and released a breath. The usage of the silver needles and the strength needed to pierce each acupoint exhausted a huge amount of energy from him. After senior disciple Li's body was riddled with silver needles, he finally woke up and regained consciousness. "You are," senior disciple Li tried to say something, but he didn't have enough strength and couldn't say more than a few words. "I'm from Godhand Valley. Save your breath and slowly recover your strength. I can only inform you that your illness is very strange. In my estimation, only my teacher, Dr. Mo, would be able to save you. But unfortunately, he is currently away from the mountain." Han Li took the pulse of senior disciple Li as he furrowed his brows in thought. "The Medici
Ne.
is..." Senior disciple Li's face paled as his lips shivered, lifting his arms to gesture at something, but he was unsuccessful. "You have medicine to cure the illness on your body?" Han Li roughly understood his meaning, and he questioned senior disciple Li. Yes, senior disciple Li saw that Han Li understood his meaning, relaxed his features, and nodded his head. Han Li was no longer polite as he searched senior disciple Li's body for the antidote. He found many useless items, and amongst them, there was a small white jade bottle which he took out. This bottle was made of expensive material and was also tightly sealed. He guessed that this was what senior disciple Li was looking for. As he took the bottle and glanced at senior disciple Li, his guess turned out correct. Senior disciple Li's expression was full of joy as he frantically blinked his eyes. Han Li unsealed the bottle, and contrary to his expectations, there was no fragrance of herbal components drifting out, but rather an extremely pungent odor. The moment Hanli smelled the odor, his expression turned nasty, and he cautiously took a pink pill out from the bottle. This pill was extremely beautiful to behold, yet it was actually emitting such a pungent smell. Is this the medicinal pill? Hanli regained his calm face. Senior disciple Li was still unable to speak, but he blinked his eyes to convey to Hanli that this was the right pill. This essence extraction pill was created from orchids, crab-tailed flower, 100-year-old egg of blue ant, as well as 23 other rarely seen ingredients. After the pill is concocted, it takes on a pinkish hue and emits a pungent smell. Ingesting it could unlock all of the potential of the human body, consuming one's life force in exchange. Am I right? Hanli coldly glanced at Senior Disciple Li as he listed the pill's descriptions word by word with an unmistakable tone in his voice. The moment Senior Disciple Li heard Hanli words, his face paled as if devoid of blood, and a frantic expression appeared on his face. If you ingest this medicine, you would need to repeatedly ingest it after a certain period of time in addition to suffering an excruciating amount of pain. If you refuse to take it, then in the best-case scenario you would be paralyzed, and in the worst-case scenario you could lose your life. From the moment you ingested this pill, fate has already decreed that you would be dead in less than 10 years as the pill forcefully unleashes your potential at the expense of burning your life force, Hanli said without stopping. Don't you try to lie to me that this is not the essence extraction pill.
Hanli said.
After hearing what Hanli had said, an expression of hopelessness appeared on Senior Disciple Li's face while an indescribable shock appeared in his eyes. Are you shocked because this particular medicine is very rare, and yet I know what it is? Hanli could tell what Senior Disciple Li was thinking. The answer is simple. I, too, have eaten a pill like this. Hanli's words broke the tension as he continued to shock Senior Disciple Li. After a while, Senior Disciple Li had an expression of disbelief. The way I ate the pill was very different from how you ate it. I only ate a single pill, but I separated the pill into 10 portions, which I slowly ingested over a long period of time. The small amount of drug I consumed was not able to do any harm to my body. Because this particular pill's appearance and the smell it emitted was too obvious, I had a very strong impression of this pill, so I easily recognized yours. I had always thought that other than me, there wouldn't be anyone else who would dare to ingest this type of pill, but who would have thought my fellow disciple had consumed the pill as well? After saying this, Hanli's gaze contained a hint of admiration as well as pity for Senior Disciple Li. Unwilling to see the pitiful gaze fixed on him, Senior Disciple Li closed his eyes. However, his heartbeat was erratic and his mind was in chaos. You should have consumed these pills for a few years already. If you refrain from consuming it now, I could beseech Dr. Imo to concoct an antidote for you. Although the antidote won't recover the life force you lost, it should still be able to grant you 20 to 30 years worth of life. Unfortunately, your martial skills will be lost forever. If you continue ingesting this pill, I can deduce from the backlash that happened earlier that you only have, at most, 5 to 6 years worth of your life left, but obviously, your martial arts will only continue to get better and better, even stronger than the might you displayed today. Since you dared to eat such a pill, this tells me that you are a person with an iron will. Since only you can decide your own fate, do you want to throw this medicine away or keep relying on it?